Our next speakers are going to talk about, our next speaker, you're just one person, though I think of you as many, is Ryan Day. Ryan's the chief resident at the VA Internal Medicine Residency Program and is going to be joining us as a primary health provider at St. Luke's shortly, and he's going to talk to us about his sustainable patient gown project.
All right, cool. Thanks. Nice to be here, guys. So, like Ethan was saying, I'm one of the chief medical residents over at the Boise VA. Born and raised in the area. I'm a proud Idaho WWAMI grad and super excited to invest in primary care here in the Valley. Going to chat a little bit about a quality improvement project at the Boise VA regarding sustainable gowns and some learning efforts that have come from that. And I think you guys will see that there's a common theme amongst many of the presentations that you've seen today. So first off, I have no disclosures. I hope to someday maybe have disclosures. I think that's when you get to be a pretty big deal in the world of being a physician, but no disclosures from me. I do want to give a quick thanks to some of my mentors within medicine. I appreciate Ethan Sims putting this on. Bill Wepner is a fantastic primary care doc over at the VA. Mo Hagman's our program director, and Ben Powers is a primary care physician with St. Luke's. So as a way of background, the United States healthcare industry is responsible for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. That is just absolutely huge, and I think insofar as my practice in primary care, I've come to understand that if there's anything that I can do that is impacting the environment, it is also impacting my patients. And I think these two things are married together well. So that was some of the motivation behind this project. As a way of background, waste management is a costly area for hospitals. And having a sense of the waste that you are producing and where it is going is often an area that's ripe for saving money. And so we're going to chat a little bit about regulated medical waste. Regulated medical waste is any of the stuff that goes in a red bag. So for those of you that have been in the hospital environment, when you step out of the room and you take off your single-use gown and place that in a red bag, that is a very costly endeavor insofar as disposing of that waste safely from an environmental perspective, additionally from a cost perspective in the ways we go about that. Over the year of fiscal year 2021 at the VA, we had over 100,000 pounds of this stuff exit our facility, and it cost over $50,000 to safely dispose of that. CDC has got some nice guidelines for us as to what is a safe amount of this waste coming out of a hospital, and they recommend that most hospitals should target somewhere between 3 and 5%. At the Boise VA, the fiscal year that kind of led to this project, we were 5.6 to 6%, depending on however you wanted to run the numbers. But we were really close. So that was part of the impetus for this project. We decided to do a quality improvement project essentially to try and get within CDC goals. And so that's what our overall goal here was to get our waste generation to somewhere between 3 and 5% so far as the regulated medical waste. A couple of the things that we learned, the first thing that you have to do is come to understand what is regulated medical waste and how does your hospital define that regulated medical waste. Most hospitals will have a committee that works through this. It's going to be your infection control team, it's going to be infectious disease docs, and it's going to be some interpretation of federal and national standards so far as what that waste actually is. The reality is these standards are not entirely clear. If for a gruesome example, if you had a bloody tissue and that tissue was not truly seeped in blood to the point that you could squeeze blood out of it, that is not regulated medical waste. That's actually just standard trash and can go in the trash bin, which is a huge cost savings, and now we have kind of gone full circle on that. So we put together a quick stakeholders meeting between internal medicine docs, the infectious disease docs, infection control at the VA, and tried to come up with what our policy is and is there anything that we can do differently. This conversation took place at the time of the triple-demic, if you will. That was back when we had peak COVID, flu, and RSV pandemics. And for patient safety purposes, we felt it was not a good time to be changing how we defined regulated medical waste within our facility, so we did not explore that. The things that we learned in that process, however, was that during one of the peak COVID waves, a particular area of the hospital was using reusable gowns when we were experiencing the gown shortage, and that effort was something that we could carry forward and readapt, and so that's where we moved forward. A little bit of supporting literature for this. There's concerns about whether these reusable gowns provide the same level of protection to the user. This first resource I have up here tells us that reusable gowns are actually superior protection to the end user. This second one here is a case study. UCLA is obviously a gigantic hospital. They were able to do a reusable gown trial in their facility. They were able to save $1 million by this, but they're absolutely a huge facility. And then this last one I have here is just a life cycle assessment of the reusable gowns. The short of it is that reusable gowns are beneficial from all the waste analysis sides of things, so far as your energy consumption, greenhouse gases, solid waste generation, those sorts of things. So everything sounds like we've got some pretty good support. Balancing measures. And if anybody has awesome solutions to this, I'd love to hear it. I think the biggest concern is end user comfort. So yes, they do provide superior protection, but these gowns that at least we had access to within the VA supply chain are hot. They're a very thick plastic, and so the user, you could imagine if you're doing physical therapy at the bedside with your patient, or if your nursing staff is trying to roll the patient, other things, it can be a very hot and sweaty device to have on. Other concerns around these reusable gowns become, where are you going to place them? You need, outside of your patient room, typically the disposable gowns, you can get a nice stack of them within a drawer. The reusable gowns take up quite a bit more space, so you need appropriate space for them outside of the room. You need a laundry bin within the room to safely dispose of it when you've determined it's been used enough. And then you also need your laundry facility to be able to appropriately handle these gowns. And from an infection prevention and control, you also have to go through excess education regarding proper donning and doffing techniques. If that gown is going to be used by one user multiple times throughout the day, we want to go about placing that on and off in a different manner than how we would a disposable gown that might just go directly into the trash. So we did a cost-benefit analysis as part of our pilot project here. I won't go too into the weeds on the cost-benefit analysis, but the short of it is, with VA-specific contracts and how things are done locally here, one disposable gown runs about $1, whereas the reusable gowns were about 67 cents. So we're looking at somewhere around 33 cents of savings per gown. And that savings does account for the fact that we're going to use these gowns 50 times before they are replaced. Most of the studies out there say they're good between 50 and 70. We figured we'd err on the side of conservative here and use them 50 times. So we're looking at a cost savings of about 33 cents per gown. Within the VA, we ran some numbers here, as you can see on the table. Essentially, the more of these you use and in the more areas of the hospital, the more potential you have for cost savings. We went through many PDSA cycles in this process. The most important part, I think, is a waste analysis, and this comes from the good work of Dr. Sims in the back of the room. Understanding exactly what is going in red bags, what is going in trash, what is going recycling is one of the highest areas for impact that you have. And that also goes into the over-treatment of waste. Again, that's the concept of you have a cup that you have placed in a red bag as opposed to it's a trash or the recycling, those sorts of things. So finally, we got onto a trial of these reusable gowns. We did it at our medical step-down unit at the Boise VA. For those of you not familiar, we're about a 35-bed step-down unit, kind of your standard affair. In rolling things out there, we ran into a couple of learning opportunities, and the biggest one was as I alluded to, space. We just did not have the space in that portion of our hospital to use these gowns in a proper way. And we also had such a high volume in that portion of the hospital that laundry facility was not going to be able to accommodate the excess gown use. So the next step that we did was we moved this into a different area of the hospital. The VA on campus has got what they call the CLC, which is like an assisted living facility, type of skilled nursing facility within the VA campus. The rooms are much bigger. There's much more space over there, and that is where there initially was success with reusable gowns during peak COVID times. And so we were able to move the project over that way. Similar to as was alluded with our anesthesiology crowd, we gave folks an option. We put the reusable gown at the door as well as the disposable gown and let people choose what they wanted to. Eventually, most folks were actually choosing to use the reusable gowns, so we just got rid of the disposable gowns altogether. And then June came. And with June came the heat. And the heat came concerns about end user comfort. And so from there, unfortunately, the project was not able to be sustained in the long term because end user comfort is just not something that we've been able to fix. These are some quick results slides. This just shows the number of gowns that we saved. We can skip through some of this. How did it go? This is essentially, it's an adaptable project. It worked well in one area, but it did not work well in another. And I think this is a reasonable segue into kind of next steps here. And I think the biggest thing from myself and from the others that have spoken already today is that this was a grassroots, bottom-up type of effort. And I think we've all heard that some of the top-down efforts can be hard. And I think in today's environment, maybe top-down efforts aren't going to even be coming. And so I just want you guys to take from this that if I can do this, everybody else in this room certainly can do this as well, and just start at the bottom with something that you're passionate about and give it a try, and I suspect you'll have some success somewhere with that. Our anesthesiologists were talking to us about finding your change champion, and I think this was one of those projects as well where we needed a couple of champions, a couple of people invested in the project, and we were able to get some success. And I think in the future it's a project that we can adapt more permanently into a different environment. I will say that there are some changes coming in the reusable gown space. In the literature, some of the concerns with the gowns are the leaching of what people know as forever chemicals, these PFAS and PFOS. Gown manufacturers are in the process now of trying to figure out how to make these, as they're like a heavy, durable plastic material, how to make them where they don't have these chemicals in them and then can go through more wash cycles without leaching those chemicals. So there's more to come, but I think the one thing I want people to take from my presentation today is that if I can do this, everybody else in this room is capable of driving something positive in the world of climate health. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Why do the gowns need to be plastic? Can't they be linen or cotton?
Yeah, that is great. I think it's a permeability thing so far as if there's bodily fluids or things like that. I don't know that they necessarily have to be plastic. They could be a particularly tight woven cloth. The gowns that the VA has access to in their contracts were plastic, but I suspect if any of you are in other healthcare systems and have different contracts, there's a reasonable chance you could find an alternative.
A lot more comfortable.
Yeah, certainly. A linen gown sounds great.
I don't understand why we ever went away from that. Do you know? In my day, we had linen gowns.
I haven't been in the field long enough to say.
And I'm with infection prevention, and I know a little bit about, there's different AAMI standards about different kinds of permeability based on OSHA standards too. So just depending on the point of use, like if it's a lot of bodily fluids expected versus if it's an isolation for a wound or something, there's different standards that the gowns might need to fall under. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great point. One question I have too is I know that St. Al's had tried to roll out reusable gowns, and one of their issues at the point of use was how they're folded. And I've gone to the central laundry facility, and that's another issue they have is capacity, since they serve all of the Treasure Valley and then some. And one of it is the folding of the gowns is a really manual process. So curious if you talked to them at all, or kind of what the point of use was with treatment or at the point where people were donning gowns and if they were easy to don at the point of use in comparison to single use?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very insightful question. I did work with Central Laundry fairly extensively with this process, and actually that was part of why we needed to limit the quantity of gowns that we were laundering, because the VA, turns out, does have their own laundry facility as well. And so if we kept the quantity low enough, we were able to stay away from the purview of the Central Laundry facility. But one of the harder things is, you're right, the folding. In my discussions with Central Laundry, they basically landed on a solution that they are going to just come to you in a bag unfolded, and your local facility will need to figure out a way that is reasonable to place them for the end user. And chatting with our like laundry folks at the VA, we just didn't have the capacity for it. It's a great question. Thank you.
Some great insight from Ryan and a really good project. Just some reassuring news about the future of reusable gowns. One of the vendors at CleanMed this year was a reusable gown company that was trying to be the figs of reusable gowns. So I don't really have the physique for their gowns anymore, but there are lots of tapered, tight-fitting, cool-colored reusable gowns that are coming on the market soon, and companies that are already trying to sell them to us. So, and just two other points real quickly. One is working with infection prevention. Thank you for being here, Ashley. And talking about appropriateness of reusable gowns, because reducing the inappropriate contact precautions that we have a lot of times is the best way to eliminate the number of gowns we're using. And then when Ryan runs into an issue with, this gown, which is the gown my company buys, is uncomfortable and hot, you have to be able to go in and work with your vendor, which most healthcare systems work with something called a GPO, group purchasing organization, that has one or two options you can choose from. But if you push the issue enough, your hospital system can go outside of that contract and purchase different items. It just takes a lot of willpower and a lot of squeak to get that wheel to turn. Don't be deflated by your hospital saying, well, this is how we do it, because you just have to push sometimes to get to the next thing. Though that pushing sometimes takes 2 years instead of 2 months, like Clint pointed out.